Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Cosmia Festival 2021 event. I'm really pleased you can join us for the Open Dyslexia project panel. In a moment, I'm going to welcome our guests, but I thought I would just start by a brief introduction about what we're going to be doing this evening. So this is a special panel. It's the first panel I think we've ever had for Cosmia. So I'm really excited to have some lovely people on to talk about a project they've been working on. This is the Open Dyslexia project. It's something that I kind of came across partly by accident, partly not, partly thanks to the entrepreneurial spirit of one of our panelists. And it seemed like a really good project to share and to find out more about, and hopefully you can find out more about it too. We are broadcasting this live on YouTube, so you can leave your comments on the YouTube stream. They'll appear for us, and then we can feed them into the conversation. And if you're watching this on kind of watch back afterwards, then you are more than welcome to leave more comments and continue the conversation afterwards. Now, there are some really good resources about this project already out there. The Kickstarter, which has got lots of information about, which we will link in the description, and also one of our panelists on their blog. There's some really great information which we're not going to completely retread, that we're going to direct you to afterwards. So we're not going to go into massive detail about the background of this project, but we are going to hear a little bit about how it started, how it's going, and what's next. So that's enough preamble for me, I think. I'm going to welcome our guests to the stream. So we have Joel, we have Chrissey, and we have Alistair. And I shall unmute you all so you can all say who you are. So would you like to introduce yourselves? And we'll go in the order on my screen. So Joel, let's start with you. Who are you and why do you think you're here?
It's a big, deep philosophical question there to start with, you know. Hi, I'm Joel Cornah. I'm an author. I am a producer for a podcast, and I am an archivist for Oxford University Press. I wrote The Breath, which is one of the books in the collection. I also wrote The Seastone Sword, The Sky Slayer, and my new book, The Stormforged Throne, which are books about pirates and dinosaurs and penguins. So if you're interested in any one or all of those three things, do look me up. I'm dyslexic, hence why I'm part of this project. Have been as long as I can remember. Yet I've become an author against all odds and against possibly my better judgment. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
Thanks. Alistair.
Hi, I'm Alistair Sims. I run Books on the Hill and I founded both press. I'm dyslexic myself. I'm also an independent scholar who writes articles and papers as well. So essentially, I basically wanted to start a publishing company that created dyslexic-friendly books for adults because there really wasn't one out there at all.
Just going to switch this. There we go. And last but by no means least, the one of us without a beard, Chrissey.
Yes, we could play a good game of Guess Who, I think, here, is like with the glasses and the beards and so on. So yes, I'm Chrissey Harrison. I'm an author, but my involvement in this project actually has been more on the graphic design and production side. So I partnered with Alistair fairly early on as the sort of production editor, as it were, for the book. So I do the cover design, the interior formatting and so on for the books, and also sort of like helped Alistair with liaising with the printers and so on to do all of that production side of things. So yeah, so we haven't as yet included one of my pieces of fiction in the collection, but I'm going to keep nagging Alistair to let me do one at some point.
That's brilliant. So Alistair, I thought we'd start with you, just to give us a brief outline of what this project is. And yeah, kind of the kind of elevator pitch, I suppose. If you would describe it succinctly like a book jacket, what are we talking about?
Essentially, there is lots of dyslexic-friendly books for children. Brilliant. There is nothing for adults who are dyslexia. It's ridiculous in many ways. Children who are dyslexic become adults with dyslexia. Adults who have only been diagnosed in their 40s have nowhere to go. And so I've been banging on for a number of years before we started this project to publishers saying, do dyslexic-friendly books for adults. You do kids, do adults. It didn't materialize. So I ended up talking with lots of different authors, Joel, Chrissey, and other people, and I decided I'll do it myself, and hence why both press came in existence. We were supposed to actually launch the whole thing a year before we actually did. Obviously, the pandemic had an impact on that, but in some ways it had a good impact in the sense that we were able to be more prepared, and so we've actually been able to get a lot more done on this project. And so we've published 8 books with dyslexia friendly adult fiction. And I think we're the only easily available adult fiction for dyslexic people, adults, in existence in the UK, which is amazing, but rather sad. To be honest, it's definitely a sad thing. The narrative's not changed still, and that's part of the thing. It's not just me producing books for people, it's changing the narrative, and so more books can be produced for people, not just by me but by the big publishers as well. And as I've got a few props here, so we've got a number of different authors did the project, including Stan Nichols, Stephen Seville, Fanna Nearview, John Llewyn Probert, Joel, I'm missing Adrian Tuchowski as well did a story. Yeah, thank you, Adrian. But we also did a classic as well, because you have to have a classic in there, and so we did The Man Who Will Be King by Roger Kipling. I utilised my academic side and did a forward. So yes, that's essentially what we've done, what we tried to achieve, with the help of people, authors, and Chrissey in helping with develop the formatting. We did the covers together, and Chrissey did the majority of make it really pretty. But it was interesting going about how we did the covers and how we discussed it and worked back and forth and getting it done. So essentially, that's it in a nutshell, what we were trying to achieve and what we've done. I'll probably come back to you later and talk about actually the consequence of what's happened since we've published and how it's gone.
Great, thank you. I was going to ask, was there like a moment of inspiration where you thought, we've just got to do this, someone's got to do it, and it's going to be us? My
sister is dyslexic, and her first book she ever read was a quick read ever. And that was about 3 years ago. And it was, she still struggles to read even now. But I looked at it and went, they're not good enough. They're not really doing what they need to do. And that's where the real inspiration to actually just do it myself as well. I wanted to do something for my sister. And that's also what came about.
Great. And they are mostly kind of genre books of one type or another, crime or horror or science fiction. Was that a deliberate choice to kind of pick those types of genres? The choice was genre. So we wanted to do genre fiction. It doesn't matter what genre it is, we wanted to do genre fiction. Part of that comes from who I know. So I know Joel. So when I asked Joel, can you do a story? I know Stan, can you do a story? And so obviously it went from that. And so I asked all these individual authors, could you do a story for this project? And that's how about, as we go on in the future, there'll be more stories of different genres and different authors. And I'll be headhunting as many as I can.
I think we also had a sort of an intention. We wanted this to be about reading for pleasure. We wanted it to be about easy reading, accessible sort of topics, enjoyable, fun, content. And because I think sometimes there's this sort of this urge toward with accessibility projects to focus on what is worthy, and we didn't necessarily want to do that. We wanted to sort of we didn't want to prescribe what it was that we were going to make accessible. We wanted to just make it sort of it would be just fun and entertaining. So.
Right, and were these new works written for the project? Oh, sorry, Alistair, go on.
But I'll answer your question first. Is some of them were new, some were reprints, and then obviously the out of public domain. Also, the point I was going to make was fun and entertainment was the byword, really. Reading should be fun, and it's very hard for people with dyslexia to find reading fun, to be honest. And so our goal was to try and make it fun. One of the people I know who was part of the Kickstarter he came back to me after reading one of the books, and the term he used was comfy. He's finding the books comfy. Now that is an amazing thing to feel, descriptive, because no dyslexic person really finds reading comfy, to be honest. They might enjoy parts of it and might get through it, but comfy is not a word you normally describe to it. So that he's finding comfy with the formatting and how we've done it, that is an achievement that we are happy to have.
Right. And Joel, was yours a new work, or was it one that had appeared elsewhere?
I'd written it about a year before Alistair asked. I'd initially written it for another anthology, but it wasn't quite ready in time. I sort of fell behind. I was not in a great place at the time. I had a very bad job that was not very good, and so I was falling behind in a lot of my writing projects. So it wasn't ready in time for the anthology I initially wanted it for. So it just kind of like sat in a deep dark folder on my computer with me saying, "Oh, maybe another anthology will come along someday, and I can pull it out again." And because I liked the story, I was quite happy with it. The first draft of it was a lot more depressing than the current draft it is, because that's kind of where I was mentally at the time. So when Alistair sort of approached me and said, "Hey, do you have a story that we can put in this?" It was the first one I jumped to, and I sort of went back over it and went, "Well, this is all right, actually." Which is a reaction I often have, because I will write something, feel okay about it, read it a week later and go, "Oh no, this is horrible," leave it, come back to it a year later and go, "Actually, it's all right, this." So yeah, I enjoyed it. I changed the ending a bit, made it slightly less bleak, which seems to be quite a common theme in my career, actually. My latest novel, The Stormforged Throne, available at all good bookshops, initially had a much bleaker ending, but I changed it before sending it to my editor, who seemed to notice. I think there's a strange change of tone here. Let's fix that. But yeah, I mean that's partly down to my experience as a dyslexic person, is that oftentimes it's hard to kind of view your own work in a particularly objective way, and it's very easy to feel very negatively about it. So while this short story does contain a lot of layers of metaphor about being a writer, essentially, it's this character who goes to this desolate planet where everything seems to have been stripped away, all the people have disappeared, and it feels very empty. Like there was something here once, and it's been stripped away, which is kind of how I felt about my own writing ability. That once upon a time I felt very confident, I felt very able to do it, and slowly over the course of years of struggling with dyslexia and trying to find new ways to cope with it, I would come back to writing and feel like I had lost something, that it had been taken away from me. So a lot of the book was kind of me dealing with kind of those feelings of what it feels like to have something you're very passionate about and something you're very invested in emotionally feel like it's being taken away from you. So yeah, I won't give too many spoilers away for the story, but yeah, the atmosphere of it was very much attempting to get that across. So that's why I felt it was good for this project.
Did you, knowing what the project was going to be, what it was going to be for, do you think that changed your kind of revision of it? Knowing
a
what it
little
was going
bit,
to be
yeah. I kind of approached it with a new eye, because initially it was written with a bit more of an esoteric idea in mind. It was written for an anthology called Lost Gods, so it had a bit more focus on sort of lost civilization, lost gods, as it were. But when Alistair approached me with this project, it kind of it took a bit more of a metaphorical turn to it, and which I feel like gave me a bit more freedom to kind of express things in a more poetic way sometimes, and be a bit more kind of open with what I was dealing with, and rather than focusing, having this sort of laser-like focus on the anthology's theme and topic, I felt a bit more able to actually explore something that mattered to me and felt a bit closer to home. So it felt less like a prescribed task, and more like, no, this is just an artistic expression now. This is something I can feel a bit more investment in.
Great, thank you very much. I feel like Alistair's given you an opportunity to be like your therapist, to give you a chance to work through some issues.
One of the things I quite liked about all the stories, really, to be honest, and including Joel's, is all of them, if you wanted to put them in an anthology themselves together, you could. They all work actually quite well together. They all talk about different things, messages, ideas, concepts. So Joel's is talking about sort of emptiness, a desert-like world with the sense of actually the old gods and everything like that. While you've got other stories about hope, about someone trying to go against a multiple force and suddenly realizing you can. You've got another story which is about what is this one? Strangeness of this going back in the past, sort of weirdness with supernatural and finding out all that. So all these stories actually work. If you wanted to put them in anthology together, you could. They're a nice fit. And I think that was part of the choice of doing all these stories, because they all work together.
Thank you, Chrissy. I was wondering about there's some great footage of you kind of mid-design in the Kickstarter video. I wondered if you want to talk a little bit about your contributions and your artistic contributions to the project, as you've not managed to convince Alistair to put a story in there yet.
Sure. So I mean, Alistair sort of picked the 8 stories that we were going to do for the first. Well, I kind of call it season 1, you know. And we had some strong ideas. He had some strong ideas about covers that he wanted to do for some of the books, but others, you know, he hadn't sort of settled on an idea that he liked per se. So some of them I just took Alistair's sort of concept art and I sort of refined it. So this probably being the best example of that, which was Ultrasound Shadow. That one changed very little from the concept art to the final. But then we had a couple of others where we just weren't really sure what we wanted to do with it. And I ended up going, well, I'm going to come up with something completely new and we'll see what we like. So one of the ones that we did that with was this one, the Clockwork Eyeball, which we went sort of like, in a sort of different kind of style for that one. So the covers, I think, for the whole 8 was very much a collaborative project. Actually, Joel's book was probably the one we did the most work on, actually, because we had a lot of back and forth on the breath, more so than any of the others.
Sorry to cause so much trouble.
Why have I got 2 copies of Anchor Point and no copy of the breath here? Right, hang on 1 second.
I think it looks like a nice, like, classic space opera style.
Yeah, it was getting the ring and all that working right colours. It was. And then getting the hexagonal stuff.
Yeah, so this was the breath, and that we sort of like started with the sort of desolate planet concept, and we had the sort of the sort of city and the sky and so on and so forth. But we were like, okay, well, it's missing something, and we sort of ended up putting this sort of overlay on it, which I think kind of echoed the whole idea of well, there's a thing in the book which that kind of the hexagon pattern kind of echoes, I think. So and then we had loads of trouble sort of like settling on a back cover that fit with the front cover. It was just one of the ones that sometimes these things go really smoothly, and then other times it has to be a sort of back and forth until you're absolutely happy with it. So
do you remember this
one?
The
hexagons, it reminds me of Doctor Who.
Yeah,
this one was quite difficult.
We spent a lot of time on. We settled on the motif of the arrow very early, but we weren't quite sure how to build a cover around that. So it sort of went back and forth a few times on that one as well. But actually, that's probably one of the ones I'm most happy with, actually. I think it really gets the genre across, that sort of fantasy setting and that fantasy story for that one. So.
Great. And they definitely work as a set as well. I know in the video you talk about having kind of shared design language, which, yeah, it really comes across. Season 1 has got a cohesive look.
Sorry, losing my laptop off the top of it. So it's
You can blame that on the cat.
Not a cat, no, just me.
Alistair, I was wondering about it struck me that this is a project that might have been very difficult to do, say 20 years ago, having so much control over the physical materials that you can make a book out of. I wonder if you talk a little bit about maybe some of the challenges involved in the you and Chrissey, the kind of getting that physical, the paper and all those bits and pieces.
Paper's difficult. One, the paper is expensive, and it gets more expensive the more specialist you try and get the paper. So there was two papers first I tried to match a paper, which is with the Banton Stokes books. And remember, Banton Stokes is about 20 years old. So 20 years ago, they weren't around. So I don't think we were able to do anything 20 years ago because children's books for dyslexia weren't around at all then either. So paper was, I tried to match, they couldn't match it because their paper came from China and it was a very specific paper and we just couldn't get it sorted. So we had two different papers we choose from. One was thinner, cheaper, makes it easier to print, much easier to get the money to print. And then you got the thicker. And the thicker was the reason in the end we went for because it did so much more. And so it was, and part of the problem is if I tried to print one book singly, I couldn't do it. Because we managed to print all 8 essentially together, we managed to be able to put the costs in the right place to be able to have the paper we wanted, which is thicker. It stops bleed through. It actually looks creamer because it's thicker. And it's just makes the book feel a little more weighty. It makes it feel more like a book. Well, yeah, you can.
I think one of the interesting things is that we worked with directly with a printer. The printer we use is a company called TJ International, and they're a UK company based down in Cornwall. And they actually used for our books the much more traditional process of lithographic printing as opposed to the more modern digital printing that you often use for short run book production. So in a way, although there are all of these new options out there, this project didn't actually use many of those new options. We actually went very traditional with the actual production. But I think something that's kind of interesting to note is that this is we did for the Kickstarter a very, very, very limited run, and I'm talking about like 5 copies of each run of hardbacks. And these were done through a print on demand service instead. And the interesting thing is the quality is not that different. So although the paper is a little thinner in these ones, it's not so different from the final sort of product that we ended up going with the printer. So the accessibility of the production methods you might need to do that is quite broad, but the limitations come from just the paper we chose in the end, for instance, is not as good a match as for instance, the Barrington Stokes range of dyslexic books. But those papers are not available to printers and it doesn't matter what scale of printing you are doing, those things are not available because they're not in demand. And I would like to think that the more publishers who get on board with getting into this sort of publishing, the more demand there will be for the right kinds of materials and the more availability there will be to any level of printing size.
It's also scalability because one of the reasons we went to the traditional is we needed to scale it up for other reasons. So we did 400 copies of each book, and the reason we did that was so we can get it because the biggest thing we want to do is get national distribution. National distribution is not easy to get, so you need to get through the wholesaler. Now the wholesaler, to have a stock item, has to have a certain discount from us. So basically, they could take all your money, so you won't get any money from the book, which means we can't then print more books later on. So we had to scale it up so we would get some money so we can then use that to print more books later on and still get as a stock item with the wholesaler. So you couldn't do that on a printer demand way, really. You had to go for a print run, which led us to obviously TJ International and did it that way. So this project we had to think about economically as well as a social enterprise, because we wanted to socially enterprise do something brilliant but make it available to everybody, which is not necessarily easily available if you're just doing it as a social enterprise. You have to think it as an economic point. And that's one of the things I was really... yeah, it's a very fine balance.
Joel, I was wondering what it felt like when you got your kind of copy in the post, and it was in the paper that was best for you, and it was your work. What would that feel like?
Well, every book that I've had published, every book and novella that I've had published has been different. Like, for example, my first novel, The Seastone Sword, which I'm still remarkably proud of, despite its many flaws. That was a big moment for me, having sort of grown up with a lot of negativity from teachers in school, especially. Getting to a point where I had a book that was real and it was physical and I could hold it in my hand and could say, I've actually done something that other people have approved of and have said, yes, this is good enough to print. And then, the subsequent ones have all had their own special places in my heart. So this one was again, it was different again because it's more kind of directly addressing the elephant in the room, as it were, being my dyslexia, because it's something that I for a long time kind of not really talked about or being kind of like reluctant to kind of mention. When I went to university, I didn't mention to anyone that I was dyslexic, because I'd learned from my education experience that was how you get discrimination, and that's how you get treated like one of the special students who has to go into the special class and not interact with the quote unquote normal students. So to have something that kind of is upfront and honest about it, it was a really weird experience. I think anyone who's kind of familiar with my other work knows that I tend to be quite. I tend towards comedy in a lot of my other work. I run a podcast called The Campaign Trail, which is a comedy Dungeons and Dragons campaign where we try and get a goblin elected prime minister. So to do some slightly more serious work and to have that be something that is addressing quite what has occasionally been quite a painful part of my life. It's. I have a lot of complex feelings about it. I suppose is the best way to say it.
I have a question for you, Joel. When you opened the book up and you saw the formatting, how it looks inside, was it much easier for you to read than you would do if you picked up a normal book?
I mean, yeah, obviously. I've worked in bookshops for a while. I worked in Waterstones and I worked at the Story Museum here in Oxford. So I've seen quite a lot of different attempts at dyslexic-friendly books, often with special fonts, which often look like the much maligned Comic Sans tends to be the one that a lot of publishers seem to go for, which comes with its own kind of cultural stigmas. So that was the big thing for me, was that like so often, I think one of the reasons that Comic Sans gets a lot of negative press, shall we say, is that it looks childish. And you print something in Comic Sans, no matter what it is, people think, well, this is for kids, this is for little children, and this isn't that. So that was the first thing that I was much happier about. It just looks like this is a normal book. Yes, the text is slightly bigger and it's slightly clearer, but it doesn't have that same kind of hitting you over the head with, oh, this is for people who can't read properly, which is the impression you get from a lot of the quote-unquote supposedly dyslexic-friendly books.
Yeah, we did a lot of research in working out what font to use. And we thought about using the specific dyslexic fonts that are already out there. There's two, one that's paid and one that's free. But the point is they can exclude people, because the whole point of this was not to be exclusive, but inclusive. And that's why it's not dyslexic books, it's dyslexic friendly, which allows actually a much wider group of people to read it and enjoy it. So it's not only for people who are dyslexic, it helps people who have eye problems, it helps people who've had a stroke in many occasions. We've had a few people in the shop who've had a stroke who's come in and actually looked at the books and this is really easy to read, I'm going to get one of these. So it does actually have an impact on a wider point. And also for people who aren't dyslexic, because remember, these are stories written by proper, very good authors like Joel, who write for adults. So if you like their stories, you can pick this up and read this even if you're not dyslexic. It allows for, one of the reasons it was quite fortuitous how we actually named the press, both press, Books on the Hill Press. It's for both people who are dyslexic and non-dyslexic to read, which I thought was quite fun as an acronym. But that's the point. It's supposed to be inclusive rather than exclusive, and that's why we use that sort of font for that.
It was one of the reasons as well why we didn't let the target audience, as it were, affect our design choices on the covers too much, because we wanted them to look like they would blend in with other books published for adults in the right genre. So we focused more on the content of the story and the genre to have those aspects influence the cover design, and we didn't worry too much about making the typography on the covers dyslexic friendly. We kind of like focused that, okay, because it's the story once you get inside that you want to make accessible, and we wanted the outside to be a nice sort of visual composition and a nice sort of piece of artwork, I suppose you could call it, that would be just attractive in its way.
Well, both dyslexics and non-dyslexics both choose by cover. It's basically human beings choose by how pretty the cover looks, how the cover looks nice. So in that sense, that's what we want to achieve. Make it look pretty, make it look very nice. They'll pick it up, they'll open the book up and go, oh wow, this is much easier to read. And that's the whole point.
Brilliant. So moving on a little bit, Chrissey, I was going to ask you how this has been for you as a writer, but who's not been a writer on the project. Do you think you may have already started a project after you've been involved in this, but has it changed how you think about your writing and how you might be inclusive with your writing in the future, I suppose?
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, in terms of readership, no, not really, because in a way that's exactly what we're trying to avoid, in that is allowing sort of accessibility to change the content, because actually the accessibility is just a function of the formatting. And so what we wanted to do with these quick reads was to make sure that we were sort of presenting something that was a piece of fiction written to be the length that it is. It's not abridged, it's not dumbed down, it's not changed in any way to make the language more accessible to people, because that's not really relevant. It's more about sort of providing a functional way for people to read the language that is there. So in terms of sort of readership, I don't really think that it's sort of impacted my writing style as such. It has definitely got me thinking more about representation in fiction. So because representing neurodiversity in fiction is another sort of issue that can be sort of is related and sort of gets you thinking about that sort of topic as well. So I haven't as yet included a sort of openly dyslexic character in my work, but I have been writing an openly autistic character. So that's part of doing this has got me thinking about how we view disability and how we think about it, and how we bring people, excluded communities, back into spaces and sort of make those spaces accessible and inclusive. And yeah, so that's definitely sort of impacted my my writing when it comes to representing characters who maybe come from those communities.
There's not many authors out there who actually are say they're dyslexic in the wider field of publishing. Joel's one of the few who does openly say, I'm dyslexic, I'm an author. There aren't actually in the mainstream of publishing many who say, I'm dyslexic, I'm a writer, and I published this excess in say the main big publishing houses. The only times you do find that is in the children's books. You're allowed to be dyslexic if you're writing a children's book, but it's not the sort of thing you want to say if you're writing adult fiction. And I think that's something hopefully will change in the future as well, because we've got changes in Black people writing, we've got changes in women writing and LGBT writing, all those different things. And I think the same thing should happen with neurodiversity. Those with dyslexic autism should be saying, I'm autistic, I'm writing. I'm dyslexic, I'm writing. It shouldn't be hidden.
So we're just at the halfway point, and there'll be plenty more time for the soapbox moments if you want them before the end. That's kind of partly what we're here for. I was going to ask you a little bit about what the reception's been like. You've mentioned a bit about people coming to the shop, but I wondered if you would, because I think that's probably where the Kickstarter ends. Is you've done some of the kind of doing, and then lots has happened since. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what's happened.
Yeah, of course. So essentially, we managed to get national distribution, which is a big thing for us. It's meant we can go to bookshops and we go to libraries. So we are now being sold in the bookshops across the UK and libraries. We've got them in, and we've had quite a lot of reception from a lot of those people who've bought books from different places, and from us as well. I think it was only, what day was it today? Today is Monday, so it'll be Saturday. It was only a Saturday. I had a customer come in who was only diagnosed in his 40s, who bought actually one of the Dyslexia books, and he was talking to me about it a lot, and he was really pleased with it. He was really happy, and he's gone away to read that and come back to buy some more. So we're getting people coming in the shop asking for Dyslexia books, and so pleased that they are, and commenting to me that there isn't much support for us. I get a lot of talk from them saying, well, there isn't much support for us at all. There's nothing there for us. There's nothing. This is so great that someone's done something for us. And then I had someone from Scotland who hasn't read a book since he was a child, really, and he's 50. So it's about 40 years since he's actually looked or read a book. And his partner saw our stuff and bought one. He's read it, finished it, bought another one. She's now bought a book 4 books for Christmas for him. And that's the first books he's read since 30, 40 years. So it is making a difference to people's lives, even 3 months on. And 3 months on is actually quite a short period of time. And we've sold a lot of books via the wholesaler and not just us. So I think it's been over 300 books sold in 3 months to people not via our own shop. Now that is, in any scale, I think, is a success of these dyslexic-friendly books, that they are getting into people's hands, especially those who need them. So I think the effect it has will have impact. We've been very lucky. We've had a number of press. So the iNewspaper did 2 articles on us, one during the Kickstarter and then another one after the Kickstarter in August. So that went very well. We chatted about dyslexia itself in the publishing industry. The BBC, again, did a lot of stuff and helped us, and they did more than 1 article on us as well. So we're getting the press, we're getting people taking it, enjoying it, impacting on them. We just need to continue doing that. That's the hard part now, is getting that continued message out after the initial jump from the publication.
I just want to say that Alistair has done an absolutely incredible job with the publicity, because that is an aspect of the whole thing that I'm like not good at. So I love the fact that I can go and find a bookseller in a town I'm visiting, and I can walk in and see the books, or I can talk to them and say, oh yeah, I've already ordered those. And it's like, it's just the fact that Alistair has managed to get the word out so wide and so well already has just been mind-blowing.
I think even a bookshop in Sweden's got copies now.
Oh, brilliant.
Brilliant. And I was wondering about because you'd picked genre specifically, what the response had been like within the industry, so to speak, within either publishing or other authors, whether you think it's what changes may have already started to kind of percolate, I guess.
Publishers are ongoing chatting with them, the big publishers, trying to convince them to do more, because, as I said, the narrative won't change without the big publishers doing something. I will be continue doing stuff and trying to do stuff, but I am a water in the ocean. I'm a little small publisher in the middle of nowhere in Cleveland, trying to make something brilliant for people. I don't have the scale that many of these other publishers have. So eventually they will have to do something to push the narrative. And so I think there's positive signs, but we're not there yet in any sense of the way. They've started doing children dyslexic friendly books, which they haven't been doing for years, and now started doing that. So hopefully it will snail's pace get somewhere. Author-wise, we had a lot of people interested in it. I've got about 3 or 4 people already interested in doing more. So it's I think the response from author side is brilliant. And authors who've done stories already know other authors who are, oh, this is interesting. So it is a sort of a snowball in that sense, hopefully. But yeah, I'm sure Joel has talked to many other authors about this project.
Sorry, I was on mute then.
Oh.
Yes, yeah. Well, I went to FantasyCon a few weeks ago, and yeah, it was. I had a couple of people come up to me and mention that they had seen the project and they were interested in it. I didn't have any copies, unfortunately, with me for that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't go. The shop ties me down.
Great. And what are the next steps? What's the future? You mentioned maybe there could be a season 2, I suppose.
Yes.
But is there more immediate things than that?
A moment immediately for me is dealing with Christmas Run and Christmas Rush as an independent bookshop. So eventually, I think next year we're going to be looking to see if we can do more. We may do another Kickstarter because costs are going up. That's the only problem. Paper's gone way up. I've already contacted the printer and they've already said it's going to be way more expensive. I'm also being more expensive because I'm not planning to do all 8 again, because I think that was a bit too much for us this time. I think it worked because it's our first time doing it, but it got a bit hectic and it took, in some ways, it took a bit too much out of the shop. And I unfortunately, that's my base. I have to think of that first. So that the print costs will go up again. So little things like that we have to try and work out.
I think Alistair and I had always talked about having, because for any small press, having a catalogue is important when you're trying to then market it to booksellers. So the doing all 8 titles at the beginning made sense for us because it gave us that sort of instant catalogue. But we'd always talked about then trying to make it a sustainable thing by bringing out maybe 2 titles every 6 months or something like that. We haven't obviously settled on the exact sort of plan yet, but yeah, the idea is to make it sort of like a more routine thing as opposed to a big event. So I really hope that we can look at doing you know a couple of new titles in the next year and then see how we're getting on after that.
There's quite a lot. You talk quite a lot, I think, on your blog, Chrissey, about the kind of the physical parameters for the length of in terms of like just how much paper it requires with the spacing. Do you think there's a way of doing longer stories that you'd be interested in, or do you think this is going to kind of be that kind of compromise?
Well, I think the blog post you mentioned was something I did during the Kickstarter, which was just sort of my way of putting down on record all of what I had learned from doing the project, which was a lot about the idea what constitutes accessibility, what does it mean in the world, why is it important, and things like that, and those sort of where I'd come to be personally in relation to those thoughts. And I did have a section in there about ebooks, so when Alistair and I were first looking at doing the project, we did talk about whether we were going to just do print or whether we were going to do ebook as well. And we ultimately settled on, yes, we were going to do the ebooks because they would, in a way, help us subsidise the paperbacks, and it would help make the whole project more viable. The thing with an ebook is that you can, as a user, change the settings on the ebook to be more accessible. You can change your own spacing and font and so on and so forth to a style that works for you. So ebooks really offer a solution that can go well beyond anything that's already in place. But we're currently in a position where dyslexic adult readers are excluded from reading as a pastime. And so that's sort of like, it's a good functional solution, but it doesn't address that psychological aspect of it, that aspect of it where, for instance, Alistair's reader from Scotland who hadn't picked up a book since he was a child. It doesn't address those issues, because somebody like that isn't going to buy a Kindle and download the latest, epic fantasy, because that's not an entry point for them. So I think that the print books are still very valid and still very important, but that ultimately in the future, I'd like to think that the ebook technology represents a huge step in accessibility that we can offer to a lot more people. So I'm gonna plug my book now, just very quickly. So this is my novel, which is a hefty beast, and this is not currently dyslexic friendly formatted. It's just sort of conventionally formatted. But when you want to sort of like make the text and the spacing bigger, you need a lot more pages, and this is already pretty heavy. So that doesn't constitute a viable candidate for a print version, but that would still be accessible to someone via an ebook version. So if we can create a welcoming environment for dyslexic readers to begin reading through initiatives that produce shorter, accessible, but more importantly welcoming lengths of fiction, I think that we can then sort of like slowly but surely let those readers feel encouraged and confident with tackling something bigger using technology as a gateway into that. So
we probably could go larger on the books. It's the reason we chose this length was to it was the most efficient length for dyslexia. We're not converting a novel into dyslexic, something which makes it massively you might have to do it in volumes. It doesn't quite work. But things which are things like Mice and Men, which is actually quite more is longer than these, so about double the size. So you probably could get away with double the size, to be honest. But we wanted to make it as easy and accessible as possible. And so it works. It works. Looking for my own dyslexia, looking at my sister's own dyslexia, I worked out that actually something this sort of size is challenging enough, so you feel a sense of accomplishment when you finish it, but small enough that you're not scared out of your wits to read it. Which a lot of people who are dyslexic who have not really tried to read will be. For me, this length is pretty easy for me to read. I'm reading books which are double or more the size, but that's because of my coping mechanisms and how I worked. So I read in a very weird way. Is my only way I can read is through academic skim reading, which is very weird. It means I can read very fast, but if something disrupts that flow, I can't read. Now these, if I'm feeling tired and stuff, this is a perfect for me to actually read, because I'm not using my coping mechanism in the same way. And then I can, I can do it rather than I would just not read something else and feeling tired. So in that sense, I think at the moment we're going to be probably continuing with this sort of size books, because I think it works very well, and we're always going to be doing these sort of size books, but we might do in the future slightly thicker books. So let's say these are around between 8,000 and 12,000 words. So I'm thinking we'll probably end up doing 20 to 30,000 words, so sort of mini novelettes, which would be a bit more meatier, and a lot of people who aren't dyslexic would probably enjoy them maybe more than these, because they have something more meaty to read. But at the same time, it's still not going to be too long for in practical, because I think this point is you have to have something practical for people to read. Once you start getting to a certain size, it becomes impractical, and that means people are put off from reading it, and that's what we don't want.
I'm thinking of my friend who lugged Neil Stephenson's is it Anathem, that's like this on like megabuses up and down the country in his rucksack, just because he just really wanted to read it, and the fact that it was the size of a brick was by the by. So I do wonder whether genre fans, there's almost an expectation that the book is going to be potentially quite weighty. So if you manage to make it over the kind of threshold into thinking about reading, that maybe,
Yeah, I think that's the point.
prepare yourself.
There's going to be a threshold where it becomes too much or too less, and we've got to hit that right point. At the moment, we're hitting the right point for what we're doing to do. It's maybe later we might do. What was it? Is it War of the World or one of them, which is slightly thicker, slightly meatier, which will be still in the right sort of size. So things like that would work quite well.
One of the ways that large print books tend to overcome the page count problem is to go bigger, is to go for a larger trim size. So one thing, as at the moment, we are specifically addressing this particular niche of entry level, entry point fiction in this short format, but we're also addressing the quick read market as well, because the original quick reads program that you used to see around and about where they would produce books of this sort of length, that's actually ceased to be now. So there isn't anybody. Oh, has it? Oh, right.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
They have started up again, but their formatting is very different. Their formatting is not very friendly at all, to be honest, anymore. It's quite cheap paper. So it doesn't feel the same way. It feels like something you read and throw away, which is a very different feeling that we want to achieve. So these are the sort of books you could take on the train, read on the train, enjoy it, and keep it, and then read it again on another train somewhere else, another time, another point.
So it says that we're addressing a specific niche that is this short, accessible, and welcoming, I think is one of the words I keep coming back to. But if we do decide to sort of like tackle something a bit longer, we might look at changing the format again and going for a larger trim size, because that might enable us to get sort of like a better ratio between page size to page count. So.
Great, thanks. It's brilliant that you're thinking about it so deeply, I think, and so passionate about trying to make a change. It's really great. I've finished my kind of prepared questions. So, as I kind of said to you beforehand, I wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe say things you hadn't had the chance to say, or the soapbox moment, I guess. So we've got a few minutes left if there are kind of burning things that you really want to talk about or mention before we wrap up.
I want to talk about
if you don't have any,
audiobooks,
that's fine.
that's all right.
Yeah, go for it.
Because audiobooks were kind of my saving grace when it came to reading and getting into literature in general. Back in the old days, I had the cassettes of the audiobooks for The Lord of the Rings and The Silmarillion and The Hobbit, and was constantly going back to the library to get them, and Brian Sibley's dramatization of The Lord of the Rings as well. Absolutely adored those. And I think the thing that I'm enjoying tremendously at the moment in terms of the audiobook market is that the quality has increased dramatically. The people who are like reading audiobooks now have just immense talent. Adrian Tchaikovsky's books more recently have been read by Sophie Aldred, who many of you may remember from Doctor Who back in the old days. No offense, Sophie, not the old days. Oh, Sylvester McCoy was my doctor. So, who is a fantastic voice artist who can do so many different voices. Going back to Lord of the Rings, there's a new set being read by Andy Serkis that's it's out or it's coming out very soon. He did The Hobbit fairly recently, and as much as I love Rob Inglis's reading from the 80s, 90s, tends to be a bit kind of samey when it comes to the character voices. Andy Serkis, of course, as we all know, is a tremendously talented voice artist. So as a dyslexic person, I've really had a great love for audiobooks and audio drama as a medium. so I'll always harp on about it. This is partly why I produce podcasts now as audio entertainment and another way of enjoying stories that I think is just a lot more accessible.
That impromptu audio was me just double checking that it's the Silmarillion version that I've got is Martin Shaw. And that's
Yes, that's the one I've got, yes.
It's like a warm bath, his voice.
Yeah, he does mispronounce some of the words, though.
Nah,
He does.
You know. I know. I think I could still sing you the Hobbit adaptation songs. I had those on cassette. And I think I could probably still whistle them if I was suitably prompted.
Well, one of the things I want to say is one of the things we really need actually people to help us on, if they can, at this moment in time. If they've read the book or are going to read the book, please give us reviews. So the books will be, and not all of them yet, but more of them are going to be on Goodreads. So if you do read them, please review them. And the better, more reviews we have, the more we're going to be out there for people to look and see. And that's really important for us. Because without people knowing about it, it can't have the impact it really needs to have.
And Chrissey, any final thoughts?
We've covered so much. I don't know. What Joel was saying about audiobooks is absolutely important. I would say let's can we stop with the whole people tweeting, is listening to an audiobook, does that count as reading? Can we just stop that? Let's just stop that. Because that would be really nice if we could just sort of not have a dig at people every time they say they listen to audiobooks, because I think we really need to get over that. That would be the only thing.
So if you dig around in our YouTube channel, you'll spot that I did a video about my book collection last year, and I've put all of my books into a spreadsheet so that I know what I've got. And audiobooks are there alongside ebooks and printed books because they're all just books.
And go to your library for audiobooks, incidentally. Your local library should have a good selection of audiobooks, and some will have them online as well for you.
Yes, for viewers that are in the Kirklees area, which is where we are, they've got an app and you can download them from the library, which is brilliant. So it's great. And
our books should also be hopefully available from libraries, and if they're not, then they will be able to order them in.
Yes.
So
they're in the whole library wholesaler, or one of the library wholesalers. We managed to get that sorted.
Well, this is going to be my last question, was if you want to read these books, what are your options? Where can you've kind of touched them a bit already, but where can you go and get these books from?
Right, so there's a number of different ways to get them. You can get them from your local bookshop, whether that be a Waterstones, a Blackwell's, or independent bookshop. You can get them from bookshop.org, which is a online shop that actually incorporates all independent bookshops, which is brilliant. So you're supporting independent bookshops as well. Obviously, you can get it from Amazon and all that sort of stuff as well. You can get it from us as well on our online shop on Books on the Hill, www.booksonthehill.co.uk. And then also you can get them from your local libraries as well. I know the North Somerset Library has got them all in. I know the Bath and I think it's East Somerset got that in. Bristol's got it in. And I'm hoping the rest of the libraries in the country will be getting them soon. Or at least if prompt them, go to your library and say, get the books in, and then they're all going to order them in because they've now got the availability to order them in.
That's brilliant. Unless anyone's got anything else they've got a burning desire to say, then I'm going to say thank you so much for your time and coming to talk about this project. It's absolutely brilliant. I've got some of the books on order, and including Joel's, and I can't wait to read them when they arrive and share them with others and kind of spread the message. So thank you so much. And if you're watching this and you want to spread the word as well, please do so, because it's a brilliant project and everybody should have heard about it.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah,
great. And I guess we do the obligatory video wave goodbye, and then we'll end the stream.